Daniel Reeves was 10 minutes away from saying "I do" when he heard his fiancée laugh and whisper through a barely closed door. "It was just last night. Two guys, I needed one last chance before I'm stuck forever." The words didn't come all at once. They came in fragments, casual, like they meant nothing. But to him, they landed like a knife, one piece at a time. 200 guests were already seated. His mother was in the front row, smiling through tears. And in that narrow hallway, just outside the bridal room, Daniel realized he wasn't about to get married. He was about to walk into the biggest lie of his life. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 2 years earlier, everything had felt simple. But now, standing in that quiet hallway, none of it made sense anymore. Daniel didn't move at first. His hand had been halfway up, ready to knock. It stayed there, frozen. The hallway behind the sanctuary was narrow, carpeted, dimly lit. He could hear the organ warming up in the distance, guests shifting in their seats. The soft hum of a wedding about to begin. And behind that door, laughter. Not nervous laughter, careless, loose, like nothing important was about to happen. "I'm serious," Vanessa's voice came again. Light, almost amused. I don't even remember the second guy's name. A pause. Then another voice, sharper, shocked. "Vanessa, what are you saying? Your wedding is literally in like 10 minutes. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He didn't hear a denial, didn't hear a correction, just a small exhale. And that's exactly why. Something inside him cracked, not loud, not dramatic, just final. He leaned his shoulder against the wall, slow, like his body suddenly weighed too much. His heartbeat didn't race, it slowed, heavy, measured. Like his mind was trying to keep up with something it didn't want to understand. Two guys, yesterday. He closed his eyes. Maybe he heard it wrong. Maybe there was context. Maybe. But then another bridesmaid spoke, voice low, almost pleading. "Does Daniel?" "No." Silence, a long one. Long enough to answer everything. Vanessa let out a short laugh. "Of course not." That was it. That was the moment. Daniel's fingers curled slowly into his palm. Not tight, just enough to feel something real. He had spent months planning this day, saving for it, compromising for it, sitting through conversations about guest lists, table settings, how things should look, who needed to be impressed. He had told himself it was normal, that relationships required adjustment, that love didn't always feel perfect. But this wasn't adjustment, this wasn't compromise. This was a lie built so clean, so polished, he had almost mistaken it for something real. Inside the room, Vanessa kept talking, quieter now. He couldn't catch every word, but he didn't need to. He had enough. Daniel slowly lowered his hand from the door. He stepped back. One step, then another. His shoes made almost no sound on the carpet, but to him every movement felt loud. Final, he turned his head slightly toward the sanctuary. Through the open archway, he could see rows of people, expensive suits, dresses, cameras ready. His mother sitting in the front, holding a tissue, smiling at something someone said, proud. For a second, something fragile moved through his chest, the urge to walk out, just leave. Get in his car. No sleazy, no explanation. Just gone. But then another thought followed, stronger, colder. If he walked away now, he would be the story, not her. People would ask questions, they would guess. And in the silence, someone like Vanessa, someone trained to protect her image, backed by a family that knew exactly how to shape a narrative, would fill in the gaps. He would become unstable, emotional, the man who couldn't handle pressure, and she would still be perfect. Daniel exhaled slowly. That didn't sit right, not because he wanted revenge, but because something deeper pushed back. Truth, simple, uncomfortable, unavoidable. He looked at his reflection in a small framed mirror on the wall. Black suit, white tie, calm face. He looked exactly like a man about to start a life. But inside, that life was already over. He straightened his jacket, smoothed the front like nothing had happened. From inside the bridal room, someone laughed again. Vanessa. He didn't look at the door. Not anymore. He turned fully away from it, and under his breath, so quiet no one could hear, not yet. Then he started walking back toward the altar. 2 years earlier, Daniel hadn't been standing outside a bridal room, questioning everything. He had been standing in a crowded conference hall in downtown Chicago, adjusting a tie he barely knew how to wear, trying not to look out of place. The room was full of people who seemed polished, confident. The kind of people who had never worried about rent or late invoices, or whether their business would survive another quarter. Daniel had built his company from nothing. A small logistics firm that started in a rented office with 2 desks and a used printer. He knew how to solve problems. He knew how to work. But rooms like this still made him feel like he had snuck in through the back door. That was when Vanessa walked up to him. She didn't hesitate. Didn't scan him like most people did, trying to place him. "You're Daniel Reeves, right?" she asked, holding out her hand like she already knew the answer. Her voice was calm, professional, controlled. He nodded, a little surprised. "I read about your expansion last quarter," she continued. "You scaled faster than expected. That's rare." It wasn't a compliment, not exactly. It sounded more like an evaluation, but he still smiled, because someone like her noticing his work meant something. Vanessa Cole, corporate lawyer, top firm. Family name that carried weight in the city. Daniel didn't know all of that yet. Not fully, but he could feel it. The way people glanced at her when she spoke. The way conversations shifted around her. The quiet attention she commanded without asking for it. They talked for almost an hour. About business, about long-term stability, not about feelings, not about dreams. It was structured, clean, easy to follow. And Daniel found himself liking that. After years of uncertainty, of grinding through unpredictable days, Vanessa felt like something solid, something stable, something that made sense. Their relationship moved fast, not rushed, but efficient. Dinner dates at places Daniel had never been before. Conversations about future plans within weeks, not months. Introductions to her colleagues early on, like she was already placing him into a role. He noticed it. Of course he did, but he told himself it was normal. People like Vanessa didn't drift. They chose, and she had chosen him. At least that's what it felt like. The first time he met her parents, he understood the rest. The house alone said enough. Old money. Not flashy, but undeniable. Clean lines, quiet luxury. Her mother Eleanor greeted him with a polite smile that never fully reached her eyes. Her father shook his hand firmly, asked direct questions about revenue, growth projections, long-term goals. No small talk, no warmth. It felt less like meeting a family and more like sitting for an interview. Daniel answered everything honestly. He didn't exaggerate, didn't pretend. And when it was over, Eleanor gave a small nod. "Ambitious," she said. "That's good. Vanessa needs someone who understands direction, not love, not partnership. Direction." Daniel heard it, but he didn't push back, because part of him believed it. That love could grow from something practical. That stability mattered. That building a life together wasn't always about emotion. Vanessa squeezed his hand under the table that night. "You did well," she whispered. "Not 'I'm happy you're here,' not 'I'm glad you met them,' just 'you did well,' like he had passed something." And Daniel smiled, because at the time he thought that was enough. Months passed, then more. The relationship settled into a rhythm, predictable, structured, safe, but there were moments, small ones, Vanessa correcting him in public, subtle but sharp, choosing where they went, what they said, always polished, always controlled, and every time Daniel felt something tighten in his chest, he told himself the same thing. This is what stability looks like. This is what building a future feels like. He didn't realize yet that he wasn't building a relationship. He was stepping into a role that had already been designed for him. And someone else had written the script. "I don't want to make a mistake with my future," Vanessa said one night, staring out at the city from her balcony. Daniel didn't understand then what she really meant, but he was about to. The wedding wasn't just Vanessa's idea. It was her mother's. Daniel understood that slowly. Not all at once. It showed up in details, small things at first. Then bigger ones that were harder to ignore. The venue was chosen before he even saw it. A cathedral in the wealthiest part of the city, booked months in advance. Non-refundable. Eleanor had already secured it just in case. The guest list was worse. Daniel had maybe 30 people he truly wanted there. Close friends, a few family members. People who had been with him when his company was barely surviving. Vanessa's side filled the rest. Judges, senior partners, investors. Old family friends who spoke in quiet tones and watched everything like it mattered. "They need to see this," Eleanor had said one evening, reviewing the list like it was a business plan. "This isn't just a wedding, it's a statement." Daniel remembered that line. A statement, not a promise. He sat across from them at the dining table, nodding along, even when something inside him felt off. Vanessa barely questioned it. She agreed, adjusted, refined. And when Daniel tried to suggest something simpler, something smaller, she didn't argue. She smiled, then corrected him. "Daniel, this is how it works," she said calmly. People will be watching. First impressions matter. For both of us. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like he was being placed into something that already existed. There were other moments, a dinner with her colleagues, where she gently interrupted him mid-story to clarify a detail that didn't need correcting. Everyone laughed politely. He laughed too, but it stayed with him. Or the time he showed up to an event in a suit he liked, something simple, something that felt like him. Vanessa looked him over once. Not harsh, just measured. You look good, she said. Then added, but next time, maybe go with something a little more structured. It presents better. Presents better. Daniel nodded. He told himself she was helping, that she understood rooms he didn't, that she was preparing him for a bigger life. But slowly, without noticing, he stopped choosing things for himself, stopped pushing back. Even when it didn't sit right, even when it felt like he was shrinking into something quieter, something easier to manage. One night, after a long dinner with her parents, Daniel stood alone on the balcony while Vanessa spoke inside with her mother. The glass door was slightly open. He wasn't trying to listen. But he heard enough. He fits, Eleanor said. A pause. Maybe not perfect, but he fits what we need right now. Vanessa didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, he's stable. That word again. Stable. Daniel stood there, staring out at the city lights, feeling something shift inside him. Not anger, not yet, just a quiet realization. This wasn't how he had imagined being loved. Not chosen because of who he was, but because of what he represented. Security, direction, a safe decision. He told himself he was overthinking, that relationships were practical sometimes, that love could grow, that respect could deepen over time. But that night, for the first time, a thought crossed his mind that he didn't know how to shake. What if this wasn't love at all? What if it was just alignment inside? Vanessa laughed softly at something her mother said. Daniel stayed where he was, still listening to a life being discussed like a strategy. And for a second, he felt like he wasn't part of it, just included. The night before the wedding, Daniel stayed in their apartment alone. Vanessa had insisted on tradition. Separate nights. No seeing each other before the ceremony. Her mother's idea, of course. It looked better. That was the phrase Eleanor kept using. Daniel didn't argue. He hadn't argued in a while. The apartment felt different without Vanessa there. Quieter, less managed. He moved through the room slowly, noticing things he hadn't paid attention to in months, the way everything was arranged. Clean, precise, almost staged, nothing out of place, except him. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, trying to finish his vows. The document had been sitting there for days, half written, half avoided. He read the last line he had typed. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty, respect, and trust. Daniel stared at it for a long time. Honesty. The word sat heavier than it should have. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face. It had been a long week, final meetings, last-minute logistics. Calls, vendors, conversations with people he barely knew but somehow had to impress. It didn't feel like a wedding anymore. It felt like a launch. He told himself that once it was over, things would settle, that real life would begin after the noise, that maybe away from all the expectations, Vanessa would be different, more open, more real. His phone buzzed on the table. Message from Vanessa. Just got back, you should get some rest. Big day tomorrow. Short, polished, no detail. Daniel typed back. Glad you had a good time. See you tomorrow. He didn't ask questions. Didn't push, but something about the message felt off. Not wrong, just distant. He closed the laptop and stood up, walking to the window. The city stretched out below him, lights flickering against the dark. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was with her friends, celebrating the last night before their marriage. He tried to picture it. Laughter, drinks, music, normal. But then another thought slipped in. What did fun mean for her? He pushed it away. Trust meant not asking every question. Trust meant giving space. That's what he had always believed. Still, he went back to the table and opened the laptop again. He deleted the last line, rewrote it. I promise to show up for you, even when it's hard. It felt safer, less absolute, more honest, in a way he couldn't fully explain. Around midnight, he finally closed everything and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept circling the same thoughts. Small things, words. Things he had ignored before. Things that now felt louder in the quiet. At some point, he drifted off. Morning came too fast. He got ready slowly, carefully, like if he moved too quickly, something would break. His suit was already laid out, pressed, perfect. He put it on piece by piece, watching himself in the mirror. He looked like someone ready, confident. put together. But inside, there was a tension he couldn't shake. A feeling that something was slightly out of alignment. He checked his phone again. No new messages from Vanessa. That wasn't unusual. But today, it felt different. Marcus arrived to pick him up, joking the whole way to the venue, trying to keep things light. Daniel smiled when he needed to, nodded at the right moments. He played the part. By the time they pulled into the church parking lot, everything was already in motion. Guests arriving, valet attendants moving cars, staff coordinating the final details. It looked exactly like what Vanessa had planned. Perfect, controlled, flawless. Daniel stepped out of the car and adjusted his jacket. For a moment, he stood still, listening, watching. Something in his chest tightened again. Not fear, not doubt. Something quieter, like a warning he didn't fully understand yet. Then he walked inside, and 10 minutes later, he was standing outside that door. Daniel walked back into the groom's room like nothing had happened. Marcus was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, completely relaxed. He looked up and grinned. "Man, you're cutting it close. You okay?" Daniel nodded, too quickly. "Yeah, just needed some air." His voice sounded normal. That surprised him. He expected it to shake, to give something away. But it didn't. That scared him more. Marcus studied him for a second, then shrugged. "All right, just don't pass out on me up there. I'm not dragging you down the aisle." Daniel let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh, almost. He sat down across from him, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. His mind wasn't racing anymore. That part had already burned through. What was left was quiet, cold. He started thinking, not about what he felt, about what would happen next. If he walked out right now and canceled everything, the room would explode. 200 guests, phones out, questions, whispers. And in that chaos, he would lose control of the story. He could already hear it. He got nervous. He couldn't handle the pressure. Something must be wrong with him. Vanessa's family wouldn't let it stay neutral. They had too much to protect. Too much image built into this. And Daniel knew something else. People believed what they saw, not what was true. If he walked away quietly, she would still walk out of that room in a white dress, and somehow she would still look like the victim. That thought settled something inside him. This wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity, about not letting a lie become his reality. Marcus kept talking about something, football, work. It blurred into the background. Daniel nodded at the right moments, barely hearing a word. A knock came at the door. A coordinator said, poking her head in. "We're about to begin." Daniel stood up. His legs felt steady. That surprised him too. He walked to the mirror on the wall, looked at himself again. Same suit, same face, but his eyes were different now. There was no excitement left, no anticipation, just focus. He adjusted his tie slowly, smoothing it down like he had done it 100 times before. Behind him, Marcus said, "Hey, seriously, you good?" Daniel met his reflection for one more seconds, then turned. "Yeah," he said. And this time it wasn't a lie. He was good. Not because things were okay, but because he knew exactly what he was going to do. They walked out together into the hallway. The music had started. Guests were seated. Everything was moving exactly as planned. That almost made him smile. Everything, except the truth. As he stepped into the sanctuary, the space opened up around him. Rows of people turned to look. Faces he recognized. Faces he didn't. Cameras lifted. Quiet excitement filled the air. His mother caught his eye from the front row. She looked so proud, so certain. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest again. Not doubt, not hesitation. Just wait. He walked up to the altar, took his place. The priest nodded at him gently. "Ready?" Daniel looked toward the back of the church. The doors were still closed. She wasn't there yet. For a second, everything paused. He had one last chance. He could still stop this. Walk down those steps. Leave before anyone knew. Save himself the scene. Save her the humiliation. Save both families from what was coming. His jaw tightened. Then the music shifted. The doors began to open, and Daniel made his choice. He stayed. The doors opened slowly. Vanessa stepped in like nothing in the world was wrong. White dress, perfect lines, hair styled down to the last detail. Her father held her arm, guiding her forward with quiet pride. The entire room shifted. Heads turned, phones lifted, soft gasps filled the air. She looked flawless. Daniel watched her walk down the aisle, and for a brief second something old flickered inside him. A memory, a version of her he thought he knew. The woman from that first conversation. Calm, focused, certain. But now he knew what lived underneath that certainty, and it changed everything. Vanessa's eyes met his halfway. She smiled, warm, confident, like they were about to begin something real. Daniel didn't smile back, not fully. He kept his expression steady, controlled, the same way she had always taught him to be in rooms like this. By the time she reached him, the room had settled. Guests leaned forward, waiting, expecting the moment they had all come to see. Her father placed her hand in his. "Take care of her," he said quietly. Daniel nodded. The words landed differently now. Vanessa stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear her. "You look tense," she whispered. "Relax. It's just us, just us." Daniel held her gaze for a second longer than normal, then looked away. The ceremony began. The priest spoke in a steady, practiced voice. Words about commitment, about trust, about the meaning of marriage. Familiar phrases that usually faded into the background at weddings like this. But today every word felt sharp, deliberate. Daniel heard them all. Trust, honesty, faithfulness. He almost laughed. The priest turned to the audience. "If anyone here has reason to believe these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now." Silence. Of course. No one moved, no one knew. Daniel felt the weight of that silence press in around him. This was his moment. He could end it, right there. One sentence, truth. And it would all collapse. He glanced at Vanessa. She looked calm, maybe a little nervous, but not guilty, not afraid. She had already decided her version of the truth, and she was going to live in it, unless he stopped her. The priest continued, moving forward. Then came the vows. "Daniel," the priest said gently, "you may go first." Vanessa's head turned slightly toward him. Surprise flickered across her face. They had planned for her to go first, a small detail, but it mattered. Daniel stepped forward. He took a breath. Not deep, just enough. Then he looked at her. Really looked this time. At the woman he had almost married, at the life he had almost stepped into without question. The room was quiet, waiting. He began. "Vanessa, 2 years ago, when I met you, I thought I understood what building a future meant." His voice was steady, clear, controlled. At first, it sounded like every other vow. The guests relaxed. Some smiled. His mother wiped a tear. "I believe that choosing someone meant trusting them. Not just with your time, but with your truth." Vanessa's smile held, but something in her eyes shifted. A flicker, confusion. Daniel continued. "I thought we were standing here today because we shared that same understanding." The room was still calm, still unaware. But the air, it was changing, slowly. Like something just beneath the surface was about to break through. Vanessa's fingers tightened slightly in his. "Daniel," she whispered almost under her breath. A warning, or a question. He didn't stop. "Not now. Because if there's one thing I've learned," he said, his voice just a little firmer now, "it's that a marriage can survive a lot of things, but it can't survive a lie." The room shifted, subtle but real. A few people straightened in their seats. Vanessa's smile disappeared. "Daniel, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice tight now. He looked at her. And for the first time since she walked down that aisle, he saw fear. He leaned in just enough that only she could hear him. "I'm telling the truth." Then he pulled back and said it loud enough for everyone. "Like what happened last night." The room went completely silent. For a second, no one reacted. It was too sudden, too quiet, the kind of silence that takes a moment to register. Then the ripple started, a whisper in the second row, a shift in posture, heads turning, not sure where to look. Vanessa's hand went cold in his. "What are you talking about?" she said quickly, her voice low but sharp. "Trolled, too controlled." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm talking about what you said," he replied, steady. "About last night. About the two men you called a last chance. Before this." A gasp, this time louder. It moved through the room like a wave. Vanessa's face drained of color, not all at once. Gradually. As if the truth had caught up to her before she could stop it. "That's not." She started, then stopped. Because she didn't know how to finish that sentence. Because anything she said now would have to be stronger than what he had already said. And she wasn't ready for that. "Daniel, this isn't the place," she whispered, gripping his arm tighter now. "We can talk about this privately." Privately, he almost smiled. That word again. Everything with her was always managed, contained, presented the right way. But this wasn't something that belonged behind closed doors anymore. "You were going to stand here," he said, still calm, still measured, and promise honesty. Promise loyalty. After what you did less than 24 hours ago. More voices now. Louder. Someone in the back stood up. Another person pulled out their phone. Vanessa shook her head quickly, eyes darting toward her parents, looking for control, for direction. Eleanor was already moving. She stood up from the front row, her expression tight, calculating. Not shocked, not emotional, strategic. This is inappropriate, she said firmly, stepping forward. Whatever confusion there is, it can be resolved after the ceremony. Confusion. Daniel turned slightly toward her. There's no confusion, he said. I heard her. That landed harder. Not an accusation. A fact. Vanessa's composure cracked. Daniel, stop, she said louder now, her voice trembling. You're twisting something you don't understand. He looked at her, really looked. For the first time, she didn't look polished. She looked exposed. What did I misunderstand, he asked quietly. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because the truth didn't have a clean version, and she knew it. The priest stepped in, unsure, trying to regain control of the moment. Perhaps we should pause. No, Daniel said, not harsh, but firm enough to stop him. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, pulled out the ring. He held it in his hand for a second. Not. Just real. I meant what I said, he continued, about honesty, about trust. His voice softened then. Not angry, not even hurt anymore, just clear. And I can't stand here and promise that to someone who already broke it before we even started. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Whether from fear, shame, or something else, he couldn't tell. Please, she whispered, don't do this here. But that was the point. It was already here. Daniel placed the ring gently on the small table beside them. Not thrown, not dropped, set down with intention. I'm not marrying a lie, he said. The room erupted. Voices layered over each other. Shock, judgment, questions. But Daniel didn't look at it anyway. He looked at Vanessa one last time, and in that moment, he saw it clearly. Not love, not regret. Just someone who had lost control of the narrative. And for her, that was worse than anything else. He stepped back, turned, and walked down the aisle alone. Behind him, chaos exploded. And this time, he didn't stop. The cafe was quiet. Not many people. Just a few laptops, a couple talking softly in the corner, the sound of a coffee machine hissing behind the counter. Daniel arrived early. He chose a table near the window, not too private, not too exposed, neutral. He didn't check his phone, didn't rehearse anything. He just sat there, watching people pass by outside, letting the noise in his head settle. When Vanessa walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. No perfect hair, no structured outfit, no polished confidence. She wore a simple sweater, jeans, her hair pulled back like she didn't care how it looked. Her face was bare, tired, real in a way he had never seen before. She hesitated when she saw him, then walked over. Hi, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. Hi, she sat down across from him, hands folded, shoulders slightly hunched like she was trying to take up less space. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy. I didn't think you'd come, she said finally. I said I would. That was still who he was. Vanessa nodded slowly. She looked down at her hands. They're saying a lot of things, she murmured. Online. My firm, they asked me to take leave for now. That part wasn't his anymore. I'm not here to talk about that, he said. She swallowed. I know. Another pause, then it came. I'm sorry, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet, honest, maybe for the first time. Daniel studied her face. There was no performance in it, no calculation. Just someone who had finally run out of ways to control the situation. I didn't plan it like that, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. The night before, I told myself it didn't matter, that it was just one mistake, that I could still be what everyone expected. Daniel didn't interrupt because now he understood, not the choice, but the pattern. I've spent my whole life trying to make the right decisions, she said. The ones that look right, the ones that keep everything stable. She let out a small, broken laugh. And I don't think I ever learned what actually mattered. Daniel leaned back slightly, letting her words sit. You didn't love me, he said. Not accusing, just stating it. Vanessa closed her eyes for a second. I thought I did, she whispered. But I think I loved what you gave me, the safety, the future, the way everything made sense with you. She looked up at him then, eyes red. But I didn't respect it enough to protect it. That landed harder than anything else she had said, because it was true. Nodded once. That's the difference, he said quietly. You can build something without love for a while. People do it all the time. But without respect, it falls apart the moment it's tested. Vanessa wiped her eyes quickly. She didn't argue. Is there any chance, she asked, barely holding her voice together. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at her. Not the version she had shown the world. This version, stripped down, honest, too late. And he realized something. She wasn't a villain. She wasn't evil. She was just someone who kept choosing the easier version of the truth until it cost her everything. No, he said gently. It wasn't angry, just final. Vanessa nodded slowly, like she had expected it. I figured, she whispered. They sat there for a few more seconds. Then Daniel stood up. He reached into his pocket, placed cash on the table for the drinks, even though he hadn't touched his. A habit. A small thing. But it felt like closure. I hope you figure it out, he said. What you actually want, not what looks right. Vanessa didn't answer. She just nodded, eyes lowered. Daniel turned and walked toward the door. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate, and this time he didn't look back. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because he wasn't carrying something that wasn't his anymore. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't trying to fit into anything. He was just himself, and that was enough. If you were in his place, would you have walked away quietly or told the truth when it mattered most?